Grand Rising, everybody. Guess we've been out for just about a week. Lots happening in the background as we're moving forward. So that is why we have been away because we've been working on other stuff. And so wanted to get on here and talk about the Soul's Code um, and what that means in terms of, well, in the terms of like James Hillman, which is somebody that I follow like his way of thinking and looking into deeper into kind of what the way he was thinking about how our soul operates or what it means to have a soul or even a purpose in life. And it leads into some very interesting conversations and can be right. It could just put you into just these different frames, frame mind frames and obviously to just different subjects as well, you know what I mean? It's kind of like this web of like different ways of thinking. um
I
so
agree.
because like what is the soul, right? It's like really, what is the soul really? Why are we, these overly processing thinking machines? We're not even machines, but that we are as humans. It's like we overcomplicate stuff, and we have to have meaning in everything, and then why.
So
And
much
so
complexity.
yeah, it is, right? It's so interesting and weird that we have such complexity. It kind of trips me out. It's like,
Eh,
why can't it just be simple, right? It's like simple's easy. um
yeah, is this integrational system. And then you start deconstructing the layers, and you can just see it's so overwhelming how much
yeah,
everything is just integrated and overlaps. And yeah,
it's
what,
like, what are we doing is the
know.
question, you know what I mean? That's kind of where I'm like,
Mm,
it's yeah, we've overcomplicated life in a lot of ways, but it's
yeah,
part of who we are as these creatures, right? As humans. It's like we have to have meaning and purpose. It's like if we don't have meaning or purpose, then what's the point?
right. You just feel void inside.
And people say, well, then
Empty.
there's nothing. But then it's like, then why are we living? You know what I mean? It's like, okay,
Right.
this is frustrating. It just gets
And then when you're
frustrating.
not living in purpose or alignment, yeah, it's not, is it living? Is it surviving? Is it thriving?
Because
Right?
I think with people, like if you look at people, individuals who actually don't live with purpose or don't have a purpose, they tend to wither away into
Mm,
almost nothingness, if that makes sense.
mhm.
And it's like we have to make meaning. So people say, well, there is no meaning. Okay, that's fine. But in order for us to thrive in this vessel, we have to make meaning because if we don't, we
Yeah,
have nothing to live for. It's like almost like there's no purpose, no point. And that's not how we operate. Like we have to have a point and purpose in order to continue to move forward in our lives. Like otherwise we're just living meaningless lives. And if we are living meaningless lives, notice that those that live meaningless lives, they're depressed or they have nothing to live for,
yeah,
basically.
yeah.
And so
Unfortunately, yeah.
mhm, which has
But there's
become
also a block with creativity too. When you think about it, there's a lack of creative expression. And what's creative energy, right? That's that higher soul, authentic, universal. The universe creates, right? That's what it does. It creates and destroys, and it creates again. So when you, like you said, there's that catatonic, kind of like zombie, numbed out from the world, kind of, you know what I mean, lacking purpose, lacking, any kind of mission or whatnot, and having no creative outlet, that can be a very low vibrational space to navigate a life from. And that comes
mhm.
back to, are you thriving, are you surviving, you know what I mean, whatever. Where's the soul, where's the ego, right, where's the
Yeah.
experience.
And that's kind of why I like James Hillman's work because in the Soul's Code, it's like So the Greeks, I believe it was the Greeks, and I always get this wrong. I always say it wrong. I always want to say like demon because it sounds like demon, but it's not demon. It's like diamond.
Mm.
Um,
Guardian angel. Like, yeah, there's lots of
they have different names for it, of
figures.
course, but the Golden Compass. If you guys have never watched that,
Oh, yes. I was thinking exactly. I've read the trilogy of all the three books
uh,
because they only made the first book
uh-huh,
into a movie.
uh-huh.
They
Well, they
tried, of
actually have a
course.
series. They have a
Yeah.
series called
Oh,
His
do
Dark.
they now?
Oh yeah, it's been out for a while.
Yeah.
It's called His Dark Materials is what it's
Yeah.
called,
Yep.
and
Oh,
it
okay.
is a series because they only made it into a movie, and then I don't know why they didn't continue. I've never read the books, but the movies themselves talk about they use the concept of the diamond or
Yeah, the books you got to read the books. The books are really good because they go into being able to travel
yeah.
and through like worlds and it's been a very long time since I read it, so I don't want to butcher it. But that but there becomes like this severance, so you're almost like cutting it off and doing harm or something. So like and I think like the end of the first movie, that Golden Compass movie, like starts to touch on that in a way, but like the books go even further. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, that would be an interesting thing to to relook
Yeah,
at
there's
now.
this.
Right
It's
there.
the series goes into all of it. The
Okay, does
series
it?
has it all. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not that I know, books and movies obviously are very different. They cut
right,
things out, but
obviously.
yeah, no, it goes into the entirety of it. Um, and what they're trying to do, right? Like they're trying to steal this essence from these souls, from the
Yeah,
individuals, which
right.
is basically what's happening today. Sounds very familiar, right? Um, and that's what they call them. They're familiars, which is kind of funny. Anyway,
Mm,
um, when you think about that, it's the soul and the ego, which are two very important things that help us operate in this world. We need both. The ego is not a bad thing. The ego is obviously there to protect us so that we can survive,
right.
right? Because it's all about surviving and survival. Where the soul, I think, is eternal and doesn't have this expiration date, so it doesn't really care. It's
Right.
almost the opposite, I think, of what we think sometimes, where it's like, you know, the ego wants to live forever. The soul knows it does. So, the
Exactly.
soul throws these temper tantrums. That's kind of how he poses it in a way, like, James Hillman, like the soul doesn't care. It doesn't see how small you are or how
Right.
little you are or if you have any disabilities. It doesn't see
Right.
anything.
This is what the soul decided for like
Uh-huh.
the life's choices and experience. Exactly. The soul is the one who orchestrates, the puppet
Yes.
master.
Yep.
I always think of the ego too as what makes us the animal, because we are an animal species that we
Mhm.
are. Primates, whatever, like, but that's what makes us because it is our nervous system. It is, you know what I mean? Those survival, the reptilian brain. It is how we are genetically at our core wired.
Uh-huh.
And there's a process and a structure to that is very, very important that goes along with the soul for that growth, for that healing. And that's our blind spot. That is our
Mhm.
day to day blind spot that we just aren't like really, I think for the collective, for the majority at least, you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Not
Uh-huh.
tuned into, not really working with.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that like the soul's code, um, there's this like idea of free will and determinism, which is like funny because I was talking to my friend the other day, and this kind of a big question for people like, do we have free will? Or was everything predetermined? And there's like this, we come into these paradoxes too, and it's really funny. So okay, just kind of going back. I'm going to be like all over the place in a little bit, but it's okay. Just listen to what I have to say. Is a friend of mine was I was talking about spiral dynamics, and then he's like, "Have you ever heard of Hegel's dialectic?" And I was like, "No, I actually haven't." So, just because I do a lot of reading and stuff doesn't mean I've read it all. There's a lot of things I don't know, right? Um, so he sends me a link and I'm reading it, and it's basically like arguments, like about arguing, and Socrates and Plato, and the argument and the dialectics behind it and stuff like that. And it was almost like to me, an include and transcend idea of like the way spiral dynamics is, right?
Mm,
Like we don't deny that there's these paradoxes, but maybe out of the paradox something new is born out of it.
mhm.
Do you see what I'm saying? So it's like,
Absolutely.
so you
We
get
talked
to
about
like,
that before, that in the paradox, you have to be able to integrate it to
yep,
like to
that's
to
right.
to be able to like, yeah, not have the paradox anymore. Look
Yeah,
beyond
yeah,
it.
correct.
So yeah.
Which makes it hard because then it expands, and I think
Yes.
that's kind of where the
Yes.
consciousness
Yes.
expands, right? And like why we keep
Yes.
expanding. But someone who's so set on one way of things being can
Mhm.
never expand consciousness because they're
Mhm.
not integrating the fact that there is this other opposing point
Right.
that is just could be equally
Yes.
as true, right?
Right.
So then it becomes, yeah. And then
Yeah.
it's like, how do you bridge the gap between the two,
Yeah.
right?
No, that's real life shadow work. I just did that the other day on priorities, for sure.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Because that was the paradox, like
Right.
looking at where my priorities are. And then the external part of not thinking like, well, where am I a priority to others? And am I a priority? And
Mhm.
knowing like, well, you can't be realistically. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? You're not going to be somebody else's top priority, like, and to like, so like to and have to work through that and integrate that paradox. But that in that moment of internal conflict, right? Like that plays out on an ego level. Because now what do I do? Do I isolate? Do I shut down? Do I become a bitch realistically and cold,
You're right.
because I'm frustrated with that conflict of misalignment that I'm feeling internally? Or do I recognize, okay, wait a minute, like, it's okay. Like, it's okay that, and find a way forward, and that's what I chose. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like I can have my priorities, everyone else in life's going to have their priorities. And I think the hardest thing is for like the parent child relationship, because as a
Mhm.
parent you always put your kids as the first priority, and then to not get that back, like
Oh,
especially when they reach adulthood, like that's kind of what I'm juggling, because I'm like, man, for 29 years and now it's like, buy me a birthday gift, like,
my
I don't know,
birthday.
buy me a Mother's Day gift. Don't just tell me it's in the mail. Like, you know what I mean? Like, show up for me, make me a priority. But that's the dynamic of human relationships and the ego and the soul, and that's where you're gonna grow, and like, and so like that's part of that complex, and so we can get hurt, we can get upset, we can withdraw, we can push people away, but at the end of the day, what is that solving? What is that doing? There's a bigger energy here that's separate from
Yeah.
who I am as a person. And that's like
Mhm.
the first thing I could recognize. Like, this isn't authentically who I am. I'm not frustrated. Why am I frustrated? Let's look at this. It's
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
energy moving through like a wave, and I'm going to ride that wave.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the integration is the big piece, right? And it was
Yeah.
funny because I was looking at the dialectics and I was like, well, I get it. Um, for the kind of include and transcend, um, especially when we come to these paradoxes, especially when we come, you know, to these ideas where it's this dualistic way of thinking. And I think that's what happens with, you know, conflict with people
Mm,
and arguments because people want to cling on to their ideas without exploring other ways of thinking, right? They're just not, it's like this is the way that I think and that's that.
mm,
And there is no room for let me hear the opposing side and see how I can relate to that or understand that and see where the person's coming from. And how did they get to that conclusion? And how come I got to a totally different conclusion? Well, maybe it was on the circumstances or the way the situation played out or whatever. And then
Mhm.
it's like, okay, now how do we integrate and move forward? But out of those paradoxes, and I kind of feel like determinism, free will is that paradox where it's
Yes.
like some
Yes.
people think they're just predetermined for, I guess we're all predetermined to die in this body. Like that, you can't
Right?
escape that, I guess. But how we get there is free will. So the way that I see it is like we have both.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
it's like, and
Super.
it's kind of funny. It's like, well, I think that we've been offered the idea of free will,
Hmm.
but we still are predetermined to end up in the same place no matter which choice we make. It's just
Exactly.
gonna give us some different kind of storyline or narrative or whatever,
Right.
but
Yeah.
all leading us back to the same spot, which could be a magic trick of like, well, I'm sorry, you thought you had free will, you did, and like how you got here, but you still were gonna end up here in the end. So, right, and then some people fully believe in determinism where there's like everything was laid out down to the choices you made. That and I don't know that I fully believe that. I don't believe that I fully believe that. And there's some kind of like I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both and is what I'm saying. And I think
Hmm.
that out of that, arises this new idea. So in the same with the soul and the ego, right?
Hmm.
So if you look at that, the soul and the ego are very, very they're dependent on each other in a lot of ways. And
Hmm.
we need both.
Absolutely.
I think the soul is obviously anchored in the body for a
Hmm.
reason.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be. It'd just be immortal, floating in the into the ether, the nothingness, or whatever.
Right.
But it's not. It's like, oh, I'm going to anchor myself into this human, and then out of that comes this ego, right? This ego
Yeah.
journey that we go on, which is like this two pronged thing, and then there's this constant battle between the soul and the ego.
Hmm.
And, as James Hillman kind of puts it, like the soul doesn't give a shit about it. And sometimes I think we get it backwards because we think it's the ego.
Yeah.
But I think it's our soul who's like, yeah, you're going to do what I say. I don't really care that, you're too small or you think you're too small, which is an ego complex or whatever. You're gonna do as I say. You're gonna, you know what I mean? You're big enough to do this and I don't care. Like I don't see
Yeah.
that you're this or that. So it's very interesting to me. But how do you include both
Mm.
and work with both?
Yeah.
So and that's the tricky part because that's not an easy journey to walk, right? To be aware of the ego as it shows up and then to follow what the soul's telling you to do.
Yeah.
It becomes this fine line too because they have the bad seed and they have the good seed too. That's another thing he talks about, that there are bad seeds and there are good seeds. And so, the bad seeds, quote unquote, that we would call bad seeds are, people who are perhaps, what we see in history, these serial killers are these
Mm.
sociopaths or psychopath or all that kind of stuff that shows up
Right.
is who they are.
Right.
And some of them fully embrace it. They're like, that's just who I am.
Yeah.
They don't care. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah. No,
we're like,
absolutely.
well, is that ego or do they have, an opportunity to shift that? Perhaps, but that was their journey. You know what I mean? That's
Right.
which is
Well,
another interesting concept. Go ahead.
yeah. Well, no, going back to the whole um idea of the soul, like you were talking about this like predetermined. I do believe in both, like you said. I absolutely feel like the soul has contracts that it makes with other souls, right? We come from this oneness, we branch off and separate. That's where we see like the soulmates, the twin flame, this karmic stuff, like all of those things. So we definitely take on contracts with our parents and our family units. We know when we're going to be born to the location, we know when we're going to die. When we marry somebody and have children or whatever, like those really big life altering, commitments and journeys, like those are soul contracts. But so I think it's like to get from point A to point B to point Z, right? If you figure A is birth and Z is death, it's almost like connect the dots. There are destiny points. And in between, like you said, like how you're navigating that, right? This person's going to come in to play this role, or this job, or, whatever, this sense of travel is going to have a role. How is it going to help you grow? Are you going to learn? Are you going to heal the karma? Are you gonna, you know what I mean, break the cycles? Are you gonna repeat the patterns? That's where you're tested on your lessons. That's where you gain life wisdom experiences. Knowledge becomes wisdom. You apply wisdom. So there's a lot happening in those moments that are even, for a reason and a purpose that are bigger than we understand or see. That synchronicity will align us from point A to point B, and it's just a bigger part of the roadmap. Um, and then I feel like with the soul, though, where you're talking about the good seed and the bad seed, and this is why I feel like it's so important to look at ourselves and look at our energy, to understand our birth and like our birth chart or natal chart. Because if you understand your elements and your lack of elements, if you understand the archetypes, and we've talked about, myth in other episodes, that is huge. That's part of what the soul and the personality. So is it a bad seed? You know what I mean? Is it, or is it a part of the universe that's undeveloped? And you know what I mean? And as choosing this experience through a neglectful mother, that experience is and that's one thing he talks about in the Soul's Code, right? Is the mother, and how the mother, you can have like the neglectful mother, you can have this like mediocre kind of in the middle mother, or this like overachiever mom who sees that you're going to be like everything, like the future president, right? And they
Mhm.
like drive your ambition. And so like, but it comes back to that spirit guide daemon inside of us that's here like for our purpose. That's like, okay, well, you chose this really upsetting, what looks like really like a lot of harm, a lot of toxic. What Judy Garland was one that they talk about. I'm trying to think in the book, who else was it? Like Ella Fitzgerald or something.
I haven't gone. I don't know. Did you skip to
Oh,
that section?
Josephine Baker. That's who it was. Josephine Baker.
I'm like, I don't know. Did you just skip to that section? Because I'm not at the mother part yet.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm in the parental fallacy part. So I'm kind of like at
Let's see.
one point looking at how, right, we're born into this system. And so it really does make an impact on why. And so like that becomes a lot of people's sociology, right? You're conditioned by your parents and your surroundings, your church, your school, like whatever, your culture. Um
But I
and
mean, in
so
the book, did you go forward in the book? Because I know
oh yeah,
James
I've been reading it. I've been reading it.
the because James Hillman, um, what's it called? The shadow mother and all that. Yeah, that is a
Yeah,
part of it where it's the hardest thing to get through.
right.
We put so much on mothers, right? It's like it's a lot of what I did in my coursework, right? Was the shadow
Mm,
mother, and I worked
yeah.
with that energy a
Yeah,
lot.
absolutely. Well, so I was just telling you, like the great, the great goddess, the shadow side, the great mother.
And
That's what
and
I was working with this weekend.
and it's hard because that
Mhm.
the shadow side of the mother is the hardest one. It's the hardest thing to get through.
Creator,
So
creator of the
for
universe.
for anybody doing the the work or spiritual work or whatever,
Mm,
we blame our mothers for everything at the end of the
yeah,
day, more than we
right.
even do our fathers. which is very sad, which tells me it's a very hard, being a mother is probably one of the, I think, bravest things a person can do on this planet, because the reason why, um, is because we come from mother. We're
Hmm.
born from mother. We're we incubate in mother for 9 months. That has an impact on us as well. And then we come out of her, and she's typically the first thing that touches us and that we touch. I mean, we're connected at the umbilical cord to this woman. You know what I mean?
Right.
And to the women, to the mother. So that
I
right
see it
there.
mirroring bigger than that though, because like to
Well, yeah,
the
but so
universe, like the goddess is
yeah,
missing. Like the goddess is what has birthed everything.
yeah, no, but I'm talking about
No,
going
I
through the
know.
mother spiritually.
I
So
know.
we come from our mothers. And so in what James Hillman is talking about, and what, and it wasn't even James Hillman, it was more, I mean, all of his ideas came from, um well, I can't think of his name right now. Why not?
Young.
Oh,
Yeah,
Young, yes,
Carl
Carl
and
Jung.
Jungian.
I'm like, why can't I think of Carl Jung's
Yeah.
name? So they came from Carl Jung, right? And so the shadow mother, um, there was a great saying, and I can't even think of where I found it, and I should post it up. I can post it up, but why we fear the mother the most, and why it's hardest to get through the mother. Um, and part of it is because of that. So when we're birthed here, our mother is our caregiver, our first thing that we touch. We're connected to her. We're incubating in her for 9 months. We come out, and we expect more from our mothers than we do from our fathers. And that's a human thing, right? I'm not talking spiritual, I'm talking human.
Hmm.
And so because of that, we connect that idea to the spiritual mother. And so if the mother is not, let's say for instance, we feel the mother is not sufficient or didn't treat us the way she should, she gets most of the shit, to be
Hmm.
honest with you. And it's the hardest one to heal from. So, we going through those healing journeys of the mother, because we have to heal our parental shit, right? If
Hmm.
we don't heal our parental shit, we can't move. Even healing the spiritual won't help, because our parents were the indication of what the sacred feminine and masculine should look like as a spiritual concept, which is not the case, right? Could be, but not really, right? So anyway, coming from the mother and dealing with the mother and healing from our motherly wounds, and the representation of the mother in our actual parent is the hardest thing to get through, because it is interconnected. It has shown us something, and it's telling us that what our mothers, maybe the shadow mother, abandons or
Hmm.
neglects, like you said.
Yeah.
So if our physical mother neglects us, we're going to see that in the shadow of the spiritual mother,
Right.
that neglect. We're not
Yeah.
going to even know how to bridge the gap between the two. We're not even going to understand what it's like to feel nurtured or loved.
Right. And
We're
then
not,
that sets the soul for its course, which, right, could
which you
be to
give back to
experience that
yourself.
now, to be able to give that to others, like, or to continue the cycle, like whatever. But so
Mhm.
it's not always, yeah, I think the ego part where it's like we get caught up in the pain of it and we don't understand like why things happen to us. And it's like, well, the soul chose. So, and that can be really hard. That can be really hard for the ego. Hell yeah, because we're horrible to each other in a lot of ways, to experience a lot of painful things and be like, well, it's part of what my soul wanted to experience. It
Right.
can be a tough pill to swallow, but it also, doesn't make it any less real or truthful.
Yeah. And then it's healing. So what ends up happening is that we heal, right? We go through this healing phase or this healing journey. Um, and we deal with the mother, we deal with the father, but dealing with the mother is the hardest one to get through. I'm telling you, in the physical plane and in the spiritual plane, it is the hardest one, because we came from that. And once we're able to connect and understand and heal. And some of the practices used to heal through that particular energy, which I loved, which, my therapist, when I was in therapy, she helped me, was to parent ourselves, right? To understand
Hmm.
internally.
Absolutely.
And that's where the spiritual part comes in is, how would we want our mother to show up at this point in time? And I think that was probably one of the most powerful questions that I had was like, um, right now in this moment, if your perfect mother was in front of you, what would your mother tell you? What would your mother say? What would she be doing? And then that
Mm.
opened my eyes, that she said now, and then I said, and then she's like, give that to yourself. Right. And then I gave that back to myself. So what was it? Well, nurturing and kindness, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you don't understand that part. So spiritually, how can you tap into nurturing and caring
Yeah.
if you don't even know what it's like here in the physical world? If you've never experienced that, if your mother didn't show you that,
Right.
right? Which is usually where it comes from.
Right. I mean, I got pregnant at 16. I had my daughter. So for me, that was like I'm breaking the cycle. This that was the one thing that I knew. If I knew nothing else, it was I was going to have this beautiful bond and relationship with her that I felt I never received. And I'm very blessed and very lucky for that. And so looking at that whole parental fallacy and seeing the role of my mother and the role of my father and how that impacted me, shift me, and then you bring in Freudian theory and stuff. Like, yeah, I see how that shaped in my relationships, not only with men romantically, but with feminine for friendships. It was very hard. Um, because I think for women, we're just already in a society and a culture early on that, body shaming and separation and you know what I mean? So girls against each other, like you're the enemy in competition. So like all this, really crappy stuff. So to not have that kind of mother daughter bond, it really impacts the sisterhood. And I
Mhm,
think as the divine feminine on the rise, right, as a collective, this is something that we're seeing is this sisterhood, where women are really like, standing in their true power of friendship, of leadership, um, because of maybe all of this suppression that
mhm.
we've just, gone through for generations and generations, ancestrally.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's true. It has impacted our relationships, and not just so with the sisterhood, but also the brotherhood, right?
Oh,
Like us
absolutely.
connecting to the
Absolutely.
guys, the all of it. It's the all encompassing, and but the
Mhm.
power of the mother is greater than I think we obviously society doesn't give it that much credit, right? Like
Mhm.
because we live in patriarchal systems. And I think it's
Mhm.
the fear of the mother, and that's kind of what the saying was. I've got to find it. I'm probably going to butcher the I'm going to butcher what it says, but it was something like both men and women fear the mother, right? And this is like you were talking about earlier, the cosmic mother and all that
Mhm.
stuff, but men more than women because the ultimate gift that you could receive, and a man wrote this, not a woman, the ultimate gift that you could receive is to give birth, is to be able to carry and give birth to something.
Mm.
And men cannot do that. So they're not as connected to that part of life cycles as women, and therefore fear the woman more. So they fear her so much that they feel like they have to contain her,
Mm.
and that's why we have these like patriarchy. And he wrote, so I can't remember who wrote it. I don't think it was Carl Jung. It might have been James Hillman, to be quite honest with you, if I'm thinking correctly. I'll have to find the quote. But I didn't write it. So
Mm.
if people are getting upset that I said it, I didn't say it. It was a man who said it, by the way.
Right.
um, but it was pretty deep in the way that he proposed it, and it made sense in that, you know, men would be fearful of the power that women possess because, and not just women, but he was talking about, like you were talking about earlier, the cosmic mother,
Hmm.
greater than that, because
Right,
even
look at the goddess Callie. You
yeah,
know, she's pretty
yeah,
scary looking. You
yeah,
tap into that power and you feel it within, you can destroy and burn down, absolutely, and not care. And you can be cold hearted because you know you can rebuild. And that
yeah.
is the divine mother. Um, but there's a beautiful power in that energy because it gets the necessary things done. And and when we're looking at creation and manifestation, sometimes maybe we're carelessly and recklessly manifesting without intention,
Mhm,
right? When you're just spewing around your emotions and your thoughts and you're letting those control you, that's the reality that you're manifesting.
mhm,
And maybe there reaches a point where you gain self awareness of your life and all of the negativity and all of the toxicity and all of the suffering. And you can't blame anyone else because it's your own emotions and your own mindset. So, of course, you're going to want change, right? And it takes a fire, it takes a storm, it takes whatever element to destroy it and wash it away, so that you can recreate, whatever it is that desire,
mhm,
and I feel like, and even with the Buddhists, sometimes I have a hard time with that because I mean, I get it, like desire leads to suffering, but at the same point, I feel like the desire is the seed in the heart, and the desire is part of the soul's purpose and mission. So to ignore desire, you know what I mean? But again, there has to be this healthy balance because we can get really dark, that dark mother, right? That dark masculine energy, whatever it is, there's obsessiveness. And that's where I think it comes into the bad seed, right? Where you talk about people that are able to commit murder and crime. And why is that? It's because everything in their way of life that makes them feel good is threatened. And when you don't feel good and when you don't have a sense of security, you know what I mean, you can swing into excessiveness. And so, not trying to speak on that behalf, but I guess from some personal experience, from things that I've, have happened to me, um specifically with my ex-husband, because he did go very, like, he did hold me hostage at gunpoint. Like, he did, go very dark because I wanted a divorce. And to him, like, that whole way of life, everything that he knew, what was life without that? And when you hold on to love and you hold on to a person with so much obsessive and control, and you have nothing, you know what I mean? And
mhm.
does that make him a bad seed? Like, I don't
Well, I
know.
think
So, but it's
I
part
think
of the soul. It's what you have to go through. It's what you have to grow. There are people that can pull the trigger, you know? So,
but I don't think that James Hillman was talking about the bad seed like that. He was talking about Jeffrey Dahmer, and I think those are
right.
some of the people that I think those are some of the people that he draws out, right? It's like the Jeffrey Dahmers, the um
But talking about free will and ego and destiny, you know what I mean? And having choices. I mean, it's all on a scale and a spectrum. I think of
no,
good
but I'm
to
saying that's
bad
what
and
James
yeah.
Hillman was
Yeah, no,
saying
no, exactly. But I
is
think that's
that
looking at human and soul and looking at all of us as a species, and trying to take what Hillman's saying.
uh
And that's where it's like I'm being very much more subjective and objective with the book this
right.
time around.
And what I'm saying, no, I
Mm,
get what you're saying, but what I'm
yeah,
saying is James Hillman doesn't say that a person who, like, the bad soul or the bad seed, or if you, I don't even, whatever you call the bad seed, not the bad seed, is that they were going to be that way regardless.
right. Absolutely.
And so,
Like Hitler was always
yeah, they were predetermined to be that way is
right.
at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So,
And
you
that's
know,
the
there's
thing with
no,
Hitler. Like, if he went to art school, right? Had he been accepted for his art and he'd been able to tap into that feminine creative energy, and express himself, would we have not ended up with what we had, with World War II? You
but
know,
that's not the way it was supposed to go. That he was
exactly.
supposed to be and that's what he's trying to say is it was predetermined that these
Mm,
people were predetermined to be, I don't know, you could call it the bad seed, not the bad seed. I don't care. You don't have the right, wrong, good, bad, whatever,
right.
right?
We've
That
got to always label something, but
so the bad seed, when I think about what Hillman says is that that's who they are, that's who they were predetermined to be,
hmm
and they were gonna be it no matter what. So even as kids, they were
yeah,
predetermined. I don't know that, like, you can sit here, we could sit here all day and say, oh, people, they weren't predetermined, or they could have had it this way, or we could have been that way or whatever, but their soul's journey was to be a murderer.
right.
That's what their journey was supposed to be. Their journey, or it wouldn't have been, right? So that's, I think that's the take that I see on James Hillman and
Mm,
what he's saying. He's like, these kids, there are children who come from great families, has nothing to do with parents, you
right.
know, and they still
End up, yeah.
end up doing these things. So
Mm,
it's like it was a predetermined thing. We as
mm,
society see it as a bad thing.
yeah.
Maybe that's the thing is we label it good, bad, whatever, but it is who it is. And sometimes you go into these people and they just don't give a shit.
Mm.
They
And the
don't give a
interesting
shit.
thing too that I remember learning, in the brain, oh gosh, I always say it wrong. The amygdala, the amygdala, whatever.
The
Oh,
armadillo.
I can't. My word can't. I can see it, but I can't say it. But the fear factor, like in the brain, right? That small little for sociopaths, it is like 17% or something like that smaller than the average human brain. So it's like the size of the pinky fingernail.
Mhm,
And so it's interesting. So the lack of fear, right? Obviously, I think that that holds up people in a lot of ways. So if you don't have that fear, because it was in a documentary that I remember watching with students years ago, and it was how they were training Navy SEALs and
mm,
like these, military, hardcore for combat, and they have to rewire the brain and get them, rid of the fear so that they can go into these places and have complete logic and strategy and know what they're doing. And so it was really interesting where they're talking about that, and in the process of working and rewiring that in sociopaths it's already naturally much smaller than the
mhm,
average
mhm,
human.
mhm,
So
mhm,
that in itself, when we look at genetics and the body and the soul and what it's choosing for its compound and makeup, whether it's energy characteristic traits or whether it's an extra chromosome or a missing chromosome, whether it's a mental illness in the wiring of the brain that, is then labeled as bipolar or schizophrenic or multiple personality. You know what I mean? That's all a part of the overall experience of consciousness, which
mhm,
then comes back to the soul and
mhm,
the consciousness of the universe and its
mhm,
journey.
mhm,
So it's very fascinating. And I think that's why I just love psychology, because I think just like exploring it with openness, instead of trying to contain it or label it or say it's right or wrong or good or bad, you know what I mean? And just have the conversations and just look at humans as fascinating species
mhm, mhm.
is what's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think, with the soul, like we were saying, soul and ego, the ego has a function for survival, obviously, and the soul doesn't care, basically. That's how I always, I mean, that's how I see the soul's code. It's like, that's what I, at the end of it, is how I think James Hillman was thinking. It's like the soul doesn't give a shit what you want or what you don't want. It's going to play out the way that it chooses to play out. And the ego, like you said, whether the ego is there for, to add this, instill fear in us and certain things that we're doing, because, that's what it does. The ego is afraid. It's afraid to die. It's afraid. The soul does not care. It's going to express itself the way that it wants to express itself. It's going to try, at least. I mean, it gives some good examples of, like, um, the bullfighter and all that kind of stuff, and how the bullfighter, as a child was afraid
Mhm.
of bulls, and then end up becoming a bullfighter. Well, he ended up dying that way, and maybe that's why he was afraid. And the violinist, who became world renowned, or the writer who decided they didn't want to, they weren't going to write ever, no, read. They were never going to read. They weren't going to read.
Mhm.
They didn't want to have anything to do with words their whole life. And then they became one of the best writers or novelists. And it's like the soul kind of was predetermined for these things they knew, kind of
Right.
like, Mozart or whatever, and this child who wanted a violin that was perhaps too big for their tiny hands, but the soul doesn't see the body. You know
Right.
what I mean? It's like, I want to do what I want to do. And
Right.
for
Express
us,
your
I
gifts
think
and
that,
talents.
I think my biggest concern with it, or if I looked at it critically, that the theory, my question would be, why is it that some people take so long to fulfill their soul's code then?
Mm.
Because some people come in already kind of knowing what they're going to do. Like, they just
Right.
know,
Absolutely.
and where is that difference? And then the circumstances, and do we pick our parents and all that stuff? I don't know. I believe it and don't believe it at times. there's
Mm.
there's parts of me that say, yeah, that is a good theory, but I don't fully believe that we've said this is exactly how we want our life to play out. This is, you know what I mean? So I go back and forth with that as well. Like, I don't know if I believe in that theory fully either. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Where it's like, oh, we picked our parents, we picked our, I don't know that I believe that fully. Like, I how do I know? I don't really believe that. I mean, I can see why these parents, what they've taught me, and how my soul can play out, and maybe how that's worked. You know what I mean? Because
Mhm.
that's kind of what he's saying, is like our soul's code may be picked, and I believe he thinks that our soul's code is like we picked out our parents specifically for that.
Right.
But I don't know that I personally believe that. I don't know. So, I mean, it's a big mystery, right? You don't know. But I do like the idea that we do have a purpose. Um, and our soul is trying to play out the way that it wants to, and that it's trying to find its way, through the vessel, right? It's
Yeah.
trying to find its, and I think it's important to have purpose and meaning in life, because without it, what do we have?
Right.
We have nothing. And that's not what, that doesn't even sound fun. Like, are we here to have fun, right? It's like a
Right.
playground. So it's
Mm.
like, I want purpose and meaning, because people are like, well,
Right.
you're just making meaning out of everything. Well, yeah, we do. And so what? It makes
Right.
life enjoyable.
Well, going back to the complexity of it, for sure, there's so much happening all the time, whether aware, self-aware or not. Situations arise, and it could be healing karma, it could be healing past lives, like things that we're not even intentionally understanding in the moment. Bigger narratives always at play. So
Yeah.
I definitely believe in the power of synchronicity, things having meaning. I do believe in soul contracts personally. I've done a lot of work to look into mine and explore mine. to do healing around them, noticing when something's karma and karmic. Like, I don't really need this person in my life. It's just because here I am repeating something.
Mhm.
So, like, boom, stop that behavior, stop that pattern, cut that out immediately, right? Noticing um, intention on where you want to put your energy to manifest. And like you said, with like some people born in to really know like the purpose and being attuned to like gifts and skills. And I think a lot of us, like, it's almost like that amnesia, right? Like we just don't remember. And there is no one, we have all these outside influences that are kind of telling us all the time that we're not good enough, or that our dreams and our goals are unrealistic, or wanting us to live in the shadows of someone else's failed dreams. You know what I mean? So sometimes there's no self-discovery, and so it's like, if you don't know who you are, how are you going to find any kind of mission or purpose, or sense of deeper calling, especially when we're back to that surviving or thriving mode? If you just have to work a basic job to meet the dead end bills and day-to-day calling, like that can be overwhelming and stressful. That How do you tap into creative energy? How do you find yourself to listen to your soul? Like people are cutting off intuition and those gut instincts. We're disassociated from our bodies. We're numbing out, through just
But
whatever
was
coping
that
mechanism.
predetermined? That's the question. That's why
Yeah.
I'm saying. Do you see what I'm saying? Which makes
Maybe
it
it's
really
predetermined that
hard.
we do have to wake up. I think that was my thing. Like I definitely see like one way of life, and then no, a great awakening. And then boom, like I don't know, my soul was like, enough. Like you can't be asleep anymore. So,
I don't
but
know,
in
but
his,
it's crazy because that's the part where I struggle because I'm like, but all these souls that are like you said, they're just maybe kind of stuck in the day to day,
yeah.
numb out
Mm. Have you
9
ever
to
seen the
5.
Disney movie Soul? It's a kid cartoon movie. So I know you don't have kids. I don't know if you've seen it, but Soul.
I haven't.
Okay, so that it actually, like, so Disney tries to explain how souls are like born in their purpose. And they actually have this like really dreary world realm where the soul is a zombie and it's like disconnected from the human part. It's actually a really, really cute. There's some pivotal points in that actually very much hit home and resonated with my own spiritual, perspectives.
Huh.
And then other parts that were just like, whatever. But yeah, it was really cute. So, and
I'm gonna have to
interesting. Yeah. And then they
I'll
did
have
one
to
on
check it out.
elements like fire and water. And that was really cute too. So
Oh, I saw
it's,
Elements. I saw
yeah.
Elements. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll watch Soul just to see. Of course I will, because
Yeah.
movies are a great way to like explain things.
Right. Exactly. And I think the fact that Disney, is trying to tap into the child at least, and give them some kind of, I don't know, meaning to like what is the soul, or or something. It was really
Yeah,
cute. Because that is part of the human thing, right? We kind of feel this essence, this void, this longing, whatever. I think that's why we gravitate to the moon and the stars, or the day sky, nature in general, animals, whatever it is. There's this longing and this connection, and we're just all trying to figure it out and do, the best that we can. Some of us, just, I don't know, seems like it's
yeah. I
harder
just
and easier or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's all for this bigger purpose of learning and growing and evolving.
yeah. I just it's hard. It's like I don't know. It's weird. There's just too many paradoxes, and this is crazy, and it's like goes spiral
And
and
there's too
spiral.
many mysteries. There are things that will just never be known and
Yeah,
never meant to be known.
hey, I'm fine with mystery. It's just with the predetermination and the free will and like the ego and the soul. And
Mm,
I think, again, my conclusion at the end of the day is like, I want to have meaning and I want to have purpose, even if it's me
right,
creating it. And because I think people, well, you're the one creating it. Yeah, I am.
right,
But why? At the end of the day, because I feel like I'm being a better human being. It gives me purpose. It gives me reason to
right,
live. It
right,
gives me an opportunity to experience others and care for others and show compassion for others. If I don't have meaning, why would I care?
right.
I just wouldn't care, right? It's like I wouldn't. So the purpose and the meaning, even if it was predetermined or not predetermined, I
Hmm.
can say this. I had a calling, I felt a calling since I was young.
Yeah,
It never went away. I didn't create that. It was just born in me. Why?
right.
Did I make it up? I don't know. Maybe I did.
Yeah.
Maybe somehow, some way I made it up and this is all whatever. Well, that's fine.
But
It has
wouldn't that be your soul just kind of making you up and
and
making it
and
all up?
moving me in a direction
Right.
that is helpful to humanity
Right.
and helpful for myself, my
Mm,
family, the people around me, right? So it's giving me the ability to at least relate to others with that compassion and love and kindness and care and all the things, right? And then
right.
also to have the experiences of living big, like having big dreams and living them out and
Mm,
going after things and not being afraid to just spread my wings and fly and try new
right.
things. And at the end of the day, it's like if I let that the ego take over. If I let ego take over, there would be nothing but fear, scarcity, not enough, living small, you know,
Right.
but my soul feels bigger than that.
Right.
So it's like I allow my soul to take over. I allow that to happen, right? So, you know, and just be free. But yeah, but it's kind of hard because it's like, well, was this predetermined? So then you go back to all of these things and it just becomes this confliction inside of you. Like I said, at the end of the day, and hopefully for people, like the message you hear is like live with purpose and meaning
Right. I think
because
that's, yeah, definitely the thing is like our perspective of the world. I mean, the structure to it is wounds and trauma. It just is. Like that's part of, this survival nervous system and how we're wired, going back to that part of it. So we're going to experience traumatic events. We're going to have wounds and those things get buried in the subconscious. But it comes to a point where we get self-awareness and we have this destiny and free will, like over our healing and over our perspective. Are we going to just continue to see the world as something that's out to get us and harm us, and everybody has hurt and betrayed us and done us wrong and we're the victim? Or are we just going to really understand, like you said, compassion and empathy and forgiveness and understanding, and let people just go on their journey and not being attached and holding on to things and understanding what it just taught us, because that's the biggest thing. If you can come to a place and at least look and see where you had growth and you're not the same person anymore, where your ego died and it did go through a rebirth and you've been able to, let go of things. I think that helps kind of shift our mindset on things, keep us more open-minded, and not keep us to like this container of self-suffering, when we can just understand, there's bigger purpose to everything, and we're just not always going to have those answers. But it doesn't mean we have to be filled with hate and harm. That's where we have free will of how am I going to navigate as a human being, and what am I going to manifest with my energy. Like, was I a wounded person at one point? Absolutely. Did I grow and evolve through that? Yeah. Did I have life circumstance happen that was traumatizing? Yeah, absolutely. Have I loved and forgived? Sure. So, like at the end of the day, I think I'm going to be destined to have, certain people and certain events play out, but my free will is how I react and how I engage. And I definitely choose myself and my integrity, in a lot of ways. Um,
Yeah, that's how I see. I mean, that's how I see it. We have free
yeah.
will, but we also have determined. Maybe we do. I mean, we're at least we all know we're determined to, and this life will end. At least in
Yeah.
this way, eventually. That's
Right.
predetermined. We can't. Everybody has a birth date and an end date, so that's
Right.
predetermined.
And there's already been so much toxic stuff. There's already been so much pain. There's already been so much hatred and division. Like, I mean, at this point, I don't want to be a part of that. Like, I don't want that narrative in my life anymore. I've worked really hard to heal that narrative and to become a different person, and now it is community. It is this sisterhood, this brotherhood, this collaboration, this unity consciousness. And trying to just wake up and feel like, yes, I was productive and I did something, that I can personally feel satisfied with. And I did the shadow work or whatever. I dealt with the thoughts and the emotions, rather than letting those control me. But to know that I at least got up and put a smile on my face and was pleasant to other people. You know what I mean? I didn't intentionally go out to look to harm people today. I wasn't looking, you know, and I think in a lot of ways, this concept of good or bad seed or, whatnot, and fate and destiny and all of those things, there comes a point where we have the option and the choice to tap into our true authentic self or our wounded self or our traumatized self. You know what I mean? All of those different split parts of psyche, ego, and soul. Or we could choose to be this integrated whole self that rises above. So there's even free will in our decisions and our choices rather than, things that just happen to us or for us. So again, it's that micro macro complexity of the structure. And really, like, what part of the microscope do you want to put it at and look at, through this? It's such an interesting topic. For sure. I'm glad we
Yeah, and then it's
covered
like,
it.
is it predetermined? Like
Right?
James Hillman said, like you're gonna be a bad seed no matter what. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
I think bad
Because
things happen,
because
but
we could
there's
we
good.
could we could sit there and say this and that and the other, but if it was predetermined that that person was gonna have a hard life.
Yeah. I think we all have hard lives. It's just on a scale and it's different perspectives. And some people can't deal with that. And
But that's what I'm saying, is it
right, exactly.
predetermined, right? Like, it's like some
Yeah.
people are maybe predetermined
To lash
never to
out.
get, well, to never get over it.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter how much good they do.
Yeah.
Basically, and I will say this, okay, just to end, because I'm trying to get the point across that I don't think I'm making, is there's a show and it's called Once, right? It's a Disney show.
Oh yeah, we've talked about that before.
Yeah. And so
Disney.
there was a point where they took out, or they sucked out all of the goodness from this little girl,
Mm.
and they put all the goodness into their daughter so that she wouldn't turn bad, because she was predetermined to be turned dark
Yeah.
completely. And so as time went on, this girl was like, it doesn't matter what I do, it doesn't matter what choice I make, it always ends up bad, no matter
Yeah.
what I do. She ends up in jail. She ends up stealing things. She ends up with lovers who beat her. She ends up with, you know what I mean? It's just, she always ends up, no matter how much good she tries to put out, it never comes back good, right? And it
Hmm.
was because it was predetermined that that's the way her life was going to be.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Not that
Yeah.
bad shit happens to all of us, because it
Yeah.
does. You know, we all go through that. But no matter what choice she made, no matter where she went, it was predetermined. And that's what I'm talking about with predetermination. That's what I think, in a way. I'm not saying fully that's what James Hillman was saying, but I think that's what he was saying. No matter what direction, it doesn't matter who came into it, doesn't matter if the guru of all gurus came in
Right.
to this person's life, they were going to choose to be killers regardless.
Right.
And that was
Exactly.
like predetermined, no matter what, right? Like that was just that was their code. That was
Yeah.
their soul's code. Do I believe it? I don't know. I'm just thinking that is kind of what it's saying. Do I believe that? And I personally, I love James Hillman's work, and I believe our soul is constantly trying to play out the way it is. But I also believe that people, and this is me, and this is what I hold in my heart, is that I have hope for people, hope for
Mm,
humanity. And my
absolutely.
hope is that everybody can overcome and transcend these issues, and that
Right.
people can live a magnificent life. But is that the truth? I don't know. That's the part that gets my mind. It doesn't matter how much we say, well, yeah, but as long as you have self-awareness. Some people may never have self-awareness.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? There are
Right.
people who may never be on this journey the way we are. There may be
Oh,
people who never
absolutely.
fully wake up to their full potential.
No, I
But then
know.
I'm
Definitely.
but what I'm saying is it predetermined that they were going to be that way regardless, right? Or was
Yeah.
it
No,
not?
I think
I don't
so.
know. I
I
don't know.
I know. I think so. I think for sure people um
I have hope
the
that
soul chose. Like, yeah.
you believe the soul shows. See,
I
and
do.
I don't know. I guess I go back and forth. I'm just like, did the soul choose, or I believe, well, I don't know. I guess there are people who won't ever change, you know what I mean? So I kind of
Right.
go believe that too. That
But
people
maybe,
will
but
choose
that's
that.
what they needed to learn. Like that was the soul's experience. So it doesn't mean like on another multiverse or timeline or different reality or past present life, you know what I mean? Because in the oneness of it all, there is no such thing as time. But it doesn't mean that in some other form that soul is, it's still going through something else somewhere else and it's growing and learning. So it's constantly, you know what I mean? There's always constant evolution happening. It's just depending on, I know, now I know. I see your face. I see you. I'm like,
It's
but
just
depending on, because realistically, like if we lived in the 1800s, right? Say we lived in the 1800s as well as living now, it's all happening at once. So the soul is experiencing all those lifetimes at once. It's just only to us where we say, oh, our past lives that we've tapped into or reincarnation. But it's all happening, in the now. So it's all about how, so it's one thread in this woven together fabric masterpiece that becomes like a blanket or a tapestry, you know what I mean? So you're just seeing one lifetime, one soul experience. But if you then look at, well, what has that soul really through, maybe it's experienced every type of living. Maybe it's been the saint, it's been the murderer, maybe, it's been the feminine, it's been the masculine, it's been the mother, the child, it's been every single archetypal role possible. And we're just aware of it in that one time, like as the murderer, and
what
then
I
here
mean.
we are
It would
judging,
be in this time
which is
space,
an
right?
ego. Huh?
I said I'm talking. Well, we're talking about this time and space, right? I guess.
Great. I
I
know, I'm
guess
just getting carried away like
so.
I do.
No, no, no. Because it's like we could go into the everything everywhere all at once, right? Which are obviously they're all interconnected. But I think in terms
Yeah.
of like the soul code and like this three-dimensional time space, I'm like, I
Yeah.
have to be so specific because
I
it's like,
know, because Pam's like, the soul's everywhere all the time,
but it
Natalie.
is, and that's it, and it is. but we're talking about this particular like
Right.
time and space and
Right.
and
This
and
one body is Pam and
this one
Natalie.
body, this one time, this one space, where is was it predetermined? But
Right.
I don't know. Who knows? I mean, that's a
Right.
hard it's just a hard topic to
I
talk
feel
about.
like you're my destiny.
Yeah. I'm your destiny and you're my
You are
destiny.
definitely part of my destiny, and I am
Yeah.
so grateful. Um,
Okay.
that and I am so excited for where we're going and to freaking meet you next week.
I know.
That plane ride's my destiny.
I know. Isn't that exciting?
That
It
is so
is good.
exciting.
But no, we are everywhere, everywhere. I mean, and that's a whole
Yeah.
other like,
Yeah, I know. Micro, macro, but that's the beauty of it. Like which
everything
angle
everywhere
do
all
we
at
want to
once.
explore the topic? Because even this was spontaneous. We're always spontaneous in our broadcasts, but maybe it was predetermined by something greater.
No, yeah, it was predetermined that we were gonna have this conversation today. You know what I mean? So it's just hard. It's hard to think like that, but
Yeah.
I
But that's
think
why I
all
think it can
that.
be fun. Like, we don't have to be right or wrong. And that's the thing, too. Like, I think a lot of times when we have discussions like this, it's like someone wants to be right or wrong. And it
Yeah.
has to be like a proof point, I got to prove my point.
Yep.
And it's like, who cares? We can just have fun. We can look at this book and kind of take our own experience. Like, I like that, we can just be open ended dialogue. And who
That's
knows,
part of that's part of the Hegel's dialect though. It's being
Yeah.
able to understand that you can't be right or wrong because you're always going to end up in a paradox.
Yeah.
And you're always going to end up with a counterpoint or a counter argument or a and that that point, if you're not willing to, let's say for instance, you're not willing to see the other point, you're not able to include and transcend or create
Mhm.
something new, so your
Absolutely.
creative juices get stifled, right? But part of that understanding or the argument is fully understanding the viewpoint of the other individual. Like you
Yeah.
have to be able to hear and listen and all that stuff, which then goes into kind of what we're doing. So pretty exciting stuff. It's already coming up in an hour. We should probably,
Yeah.
but well, I don't know if people just stay on here. We just talk forever, and then people can just do whatever they want. But we we have our
Super
website coming out, womenofconsciousness.com. Please look at it. We will be working specifically with women who are identify as the chaser in the twin flame scenario. Wanting to work with women who have chased love their whole life, have reached for others to find their happiness, their joy, or for reaching externally, period, not just for lovers or whatever, but really trying to heal that love within themselves and love for self and start really being boss bitches and living their life fully and living their purpose.
Right.
So
Inner union with self.
yeah, and so hopefully people will
Yeah. And
I'll say
readings. We're definitely gonna be doing readings.
yeah.
Oracle, yeah, cards,
Yeah,
divination.
readings. We have readings. We're going to be taking on clients, 5 clients each. So, it's going to be a small, exclusive amount of people, but hopefully people will get to the end of this to hear this message. But we, they're like, oh, that was long. I don't know if I'm going to get to the end of this podcast. But just look out for our website, womenofconsciousness.com, and Instagram, Women of Consciousness, or at Women of Consciousness. There's an opportunity eventually. Right now, we're still waiting for the approval to donate to the community that we're trying to build. So hopefully, you guys get on there and do that. And then you guys can be a part of it as well. Okay, so we love you. Pam, anything else?
No, that's it. Lots of stuff that we've been working on, lots to come. So it's going to be a really beautiful year because we're already working at planting the seeds. So just super excited for all of it. So grateful.
Yay.
Destiny awaits.
All right. Bye.
Bye.